So to start off this week, I want to talk a little bit about just some themes that we're going to come across in this course many, many times. Now, it's a little bit of cart before the horse because I haven't recorded all of the material for this class yet. Spoiler alert, sorry. And I think there will probably be some additional themes as we begin to discuss more as a group and that sort of thing. But I want to talk about just some themes that I've begun to sort of formulate as we go through this. So let's start there. The first one, I feel like I'm the most negative person about this class. Like I'm just like, hey, let's talk about AI, and it's actually like the first thing that everything this week has been AI sucks. But AI sucks. I actually think most of the AI tools that we're using today are not really ready for broad adoption. I think there's been a hype cycle around ChatGPT, and you're already starting to see that hype cycle sort of die down, or people are sort of reactive toward it. I think we need to acknowledge this, and I think we need to be very clear with our products that these things may not work as well as we're claiming they do, especially as we begin to see this like work across every different type of software and every different use case. We're starting to see it fails quite a lot, and dealing with failure is actually a big important part for experience designers. Like we already know about error states, we already know about these things, so we need to think about how we can build that out as we begin to explore these tools in more detail. If you've never seen this is a really great. I love this chart. This is every sort of piece of software tool. This is the Gartner hype cycle. I would say for some of us, many of the tech influencers out in the world are right here. I have been working in this area long enough that I'm probably about here. I'm not fully disillusioned yet, but I'm definitely on my way there. But in a year or two, maybe even less, we should be here, which is that I do think there are clear use cases for AI, and these models get better and better every year. The challenge is that most people talk about AI as if it does this, but the reality is it does something more like this, right? So when people talk about ChatGPT and they say, oh, it can write an email for you, it's like, yeah, it can write the structure of an email for you. But if you ever actually read that email, you're like, there's nothing here. It's a bunch of flat, empty words. And at the same time, like most of the time, what we need to say is something very specific. And in many cases, like these models are not doing a good job of actually achieving that. So there is a write me the basic structure of what an email should look like. That is a very valid and useful tool, right? Having a template, but there's no like, hey, write this exact email for me, right? And sure, many of us have started to get emails from either friends, family, coworkers, whatever, and we're like, this reads like an AI generated email. Like what's going on is like there's nothing of value or substance in this email from this person, but yet it feels like that. And I think that's kind of what we're starting to realize is that a lot of these tools do not have depth or anything beyond a surface level. And I think we can get there, but you can't get there overnight. You won't get there by just integrating a ChatGPT API into your product. So again, acknowledging like, hey, this might be a little hit or miss, but we're going to work through it with you is a good way to build trust with your customers. And that's something that we'll definitely talk about a lot more in this class. So obviously the reason that many of us are here is that we know that this is going to require new interfaces. And quite honestly, like I am very disappointed in many, many, many of the AI interfaces that I see today. Although actually, as I started to do more research for this class, I'm starting to find more and more good examples. So that's great. There's clearly designers who are starting to tackle these things and understanding the reality of the situation. But these tools do require new interfaces. The way they work is very, very different from the way that we're used to working, right? That's sort of like, we're going to write the logic structure for you. It'll be predefined into this more like, quite honestly, more generative open space where you can generate. I mean, one of the challenges I think one of the things I think is really interesting here is that, we are used to saying like, oh, a customer wants an image, let's give them one image, or let's give them the best image. But with these new AI tools, it may be like, well, hey, we can show the customer 100 images, and from that they can pick their favorite. Like that's a vastly different interface, right? It's no longer about like, here's the one perfect image. About, hey, how do we make this so it's like readable and you can look through all these images and pick out your favorite? That's a different challenge, and it requires a different type of interface. Maybe corollary to that, or somehow like a subsection of that, is that I honestly think today many, many AI tools put too much effort and learning on the user. Meaning, you've probably heard about prompt engineering. We'll talk a lot about prompt engineering when we get into the text to text models as well as generative imaging models. And and I'm sure I will have like a 30-minute rant to me in the future about prompt engineering is not a user interface. It's an okay starting point, but it requires the user to either experiment a lot with the tool or be able to Google and find cheat sheets and be able to find hacks and other ways to get to these models to work for you. And this is so common across every AI tool I see, with very few exceptions, which is that most people are just building these models and dumping these models in front of the customer and saying, you go figure it out. We don't know how it works either. And I think this is one of the challenges with that sort of black box behavior of these AI models is that the people actually building them barely know how they work. So how can we expect to then educate our customers on how to use them in the right way or to get the most out of these models? And this is just one of the big challenges that we're going to face this year. And again, why I think why we need multiple designers in every one of these products, not one designer on one individual, or in many cases, what companies think is we need half a designer on this. So again, I think design will play a big role in how we help customers interface with these honestly somewhat challenging tools. Another really common thing I want to highlight here is that many of the people that are a part of this course are traditionally trained in product design. We should not give up those sort of behaviors and those skill sets just because there's a new tool called AI that seems to be making stuff happen faster. There is the opportunity for sort of a spray and pray methodology with AI. And I think we're seeing a lot of startups sort of entering into that area where it's just like, we'll just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks for customers. And that works fine for startups probably, right? Like realistically, a startup's job is to do that. But for many of us who might work at larger companies with already a stable revenue income stream or, trying to build up a larger customer base, we actually need to approach this more from a user-centered design perspective. And I actually think a lot of AI tools in the future, in fact, some of the ones that are most successful today are already leveraging sort of a real product design experience on top of the model itself. So you can think about the models as a new technology that is usable amongst other things you're already using, right? So if-else statements, shallow AI type of stuff like linear regression models, like those sort of things. So there's a bunch of opportunities here for us to leverage existing design patterns on top of these tools. And we'll definitely look at some examples of that as we go through the examples in this course. But as I've already highlighted, I do think this sort of like build from a data set, train a model, and then infer from that model, there is a different process in that experience. And I think we as designers will need to figure out how to work with that. One of the biggest things that I have sort of seen in this world is how do you QA these things, right? In a traditional software program, either you or you're an engineer, or maybe if you're lucky enough to have QA people on your team, can be given certain guardrails to say like, okay, like try to break this thing doing these 10 different tasks. In which case you can go and improve like, hey, there's a bug here somewhere, or this is working well, or this isn't working well. But in these sort of black box tools, it's a lot more like, how do we QA this thing? Every prompt I give it might give me back a different image. Like, how do I know if that's good or bad? So also there's like probably things to talk about with your tracking team, right? Are we recording every one of these sessions for watching use? Do we need to be doing more interviews where we actually watch customers use these things and see what results they get, right? One of the challenges here is that a lot of the content that comes out, you might not ever know about it if it's working or not. And these are really big challenges for experienced designers, and obviously fundamental problems for businesses and the product people that are building them. And we don't yet have a great way of how to do this. Actually, in talking with Keelan in this week's interview, we talked a little bit about how social media tries to solve for this, which is that, social media also has these problems of where the content is so overflowing. There's more video than you could watch every day on YouTube being uploaded. Twitter and Facebook, there's so many more posts. How do you begin to categorize this? And I think one of the things that she said was like, think about it as like a faucet head in your shower with different modes. And, how do you work within different customer groups using those different modes? And there may be something you think about here with these models as well. I've actually yet to see anyone talk about this, and I'm really fascinated to sort of see where it goes. So I will definitely be talking to people in our interview sessions about how they manage this, because it is a huge problem, and it's as we get more and more of these personalized solutions, it's harder and harder to keep track of that stuff. Wait, did I already cover this one? Oh no, I didn't. This is slightly different. Okay, so we've talked about how already we need different interfaces for different users, or different these different tools, but also different users are going to need different interfaces. I mean, this has always been true, right? We've always had the pro user, the prosumer user, the consumer user, right? The difference between I don't know, a video editing program on your phone versus a Final Cut Pro, or like some other video editing tool that is like a crazy suite of things for film or professional filmmakers versus you trying to edit a video to upload to Instagram or whatever it is, right? So like, but I think the challenge here is AI is going to make this even harder, right? So now it's not just like, okay, different types of customers, but also different personalized solutions for each customer, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to become a massive challenge. And actually, I think we're starting to see this already today with some of the good AI tools I'm starting to see. So here's a couple examples. So I actually hadn't looked at Firefly, which is Adobe's text-to-image generator, probably since they launched the first version. And I thought it was fine, whatever. But I came back this week just to take a look at what they're doing and just sort of see what they have. I actually think this new version, I think we should look at this more when we talk about image generation, but there's some really interesting tools here. So for example, like I love that they are actually starting to turn prompts into more of a UI solution. So being able to take, some predefined effects or predefined sort of styles. I think there's styles below here, and that gets added to your prompt. And this allows someone who doesn't know how to do prompt engineering to actually utilize these tools. So I think it's a great example of like for someone who's probably not as AI aware as many of us are, the fact that this UI helps encourage certain behaviors or encourage customers to think through that is really great. Now, this is still, I would say, maybe a consumer level tool, maybe a prosumer level tool. But if we compare that to, say, this guy, which is sort of the new thing that everyone in the text to image world is using, this is what's called Comfy UI. It's obviously a node-based program. Each one of these nodes does all sorts of crazy stuff. And now node-based editors have been around for a long time. A lot of musicians use them for various tasks. But what I think is fascinating here is these both do the same thing, right? They both convert text into images, but the level of detail or the level of control within each one of them is so different. And this is what I think is great about where we are today is like you could build either one of these as a UI designer and they would work as long as it's the right thing for the right customer. So again, sort of that user-centered approach of like, hey, is this person, do they want to be able to tweak every single detail of this thing? Maybe they need Comfy UI, which is, also open source. There's lots of different ways to think about all these tools, but like this gets us to a place of where we can begin to see how these things might break apart by the level of knowledge, the level of interest in this.